Hello. Hello, everyone. I'm Juanita. I am going to be your host today, and I want to introduce the people that are going to be today with me. We're going to have Isabella. Isabella, please turn on your camera. Hi, Isabella. And
Hi
we're going to
there.
have Carlos today. Hello, Carlos. So today we're going to be talking about Spyder's new logo. Yay! So after a bunch of time, we decided to change our logo, and now we have a really, really pretty one thanks to Isabella's hard work. And we're going to have Carlos and Isabella talking about our old logo on our new logo. So the first thing that I want to do is to talk a little bit about the history of the logo. So for that, I'm gonna have Carlos, who has been in Spyder for a long time. So can you please show us the old logo and maybe explain a little bit about what is it and like how is it made, the colors and stuff?
Sure. Let me share my screen.
Yeah, please.
Okay. Can you see my screen?
Yep.
Yep. Okay. So this is the current logo. And as you can see, well, it has three main colors: white for the spider web, and also dark gray for the background of the gray, for the background of the web, sorry, and this red for the Python snake. So the idea of the logo is kind of representing a mix between uh, Python trapped in spider web, and that's the main idea.
That is so great. Okay, so how long ago was this logo designed?
So the logo was designed by Pierre Ribot, the previous Spyder maintainer and also the Spyder creator. It was designed in 2009 for the first Spyder version, Spyder 1.0.
Okay, and you said that Pierre was the one who designed it, the logo?
Yeah.
And how
Yeah.
did he do that in like
He told me that he did it using Inkscape, which is an open source vector graphics software. And yeah, what he tried to do is what I just told you. Try to represent like Python trapped in spider web due to the name of Spyder.
so has this spider name like been there always, or was it originally something else? Like
Yeah, that's a good question, Juanita. So the thing is that I mean, before Spyder, there was Pierre created a predecessor of it called PyD. And as you can see, this is a screenshot of PyD. And uh, I think he created it 2 years before changing its name to Spyder and releasing Spyder 1.0. So probably in 2007. But you can see here that the current elements that are still present in Spyder were in PyD2. Like this is the Web Explorer, this is the console. In those days, we didn't, or Spyder didn't, or haven't had integrated the IPython console. So this is just a regular Python interpreter. And you can see here the help pane. And here, this is kind of the plots pane. In those days, it was easy to integrate matplotlib inside the Spyder. So these are interactive plots, which we hope to add again to Spyder in the future.
that's such a vintage version of Spider. It's so cool to see. So you said it was called by DE before, and did it have the logo that it has like right now, or did it like have some other logo, or when did the logo start? Like
Yeah. So before, well, this is another screenshot of PyD, and you can see here in this screenshot, you can see also the editor. Has more like a, in this case, or in this screenshot, you can see more like a MATLAB look and feel for PyD. But about the logo, this was the logo. I don't know if you can see it. Let me increase the size a bit. I mean, this sorry, Pierre didn't send me a vectorized version, so this is just a PNG version of that project. But yeah, that was the logo. I think Pierre also designed it. He didn't mention that, but I guess he he did it also.
And it was blue and yellow before. Now we have other
Mhm.
colors. That's so cool.
That's
Uh,
right.
so why did we decide to change the logo? Like, why now after like 12 years of having
Well,
another one?
mainly it was because we met Isabella through Quansite. So I think Isabella started to work for Quansite in April of last year. So you, Juanita, or I asked you to reach out to Isabella and ask her if she could help us with a lot of UI UX stuff, including the logo. No, so I would like to ask you how you contacted first Isabella and what, how did you approach her?
So I remember that I texted her on Slack, and it was a little bit tricky at first to find a like a schedule for us to meet. But after that, we ended up like meeting, and we talked not only about the logo but about the other UX implementations that we wanted to have for Spyder. And I think that she thought it was a good idea. How do you feel when we asked you to do a new logo for Spyder?
I mean, I wasn't super surprised at the time. I know that when people hear the word designer, usually logo comes to mind. Like that's kind of the cliche, but I think it's true. I had a couple projects who were very excited to see the word designer in some open source spaces, especially someone with committed time, right? Like not only a volunteer that they didn't know how much time that person could put in. So I think there was a lot of excitement. So I was kind of like, okay, here we go. But it was good to see. Like I like meeting different teams and seeing different problems with that. So yeah, it was. I don't know. I guess I felt good about it, but I was just not 100% sure how it was going to go yet because I didn't know y'all that well.
Well, in my opinion, it went great. I think we have a really, really pretty logo now. So let's see it. I want to see a new logo. Can you show us the new logo, Isabella? Maybe explain a little bit about the elements that it has and the colors.
Sure. So, okay, no, sorry. We have a cat visitor interfering mildly off screen, but we're gonna fix that momentarily. There we go. So this is the logo we ended up deciding on after about a year of process. So there were some gaps in that, particularly when we were working on Spyder 5, we took a pause on making logo iterations. So it wasn't a year solid, but still this had been a long time coming for sure. One of the key things with this that I do want to point out, despite the fact that I would say it looks very different from the prior logo, one of our main goals was to keep the essence of that though, right? Carlos in particular, I think because of his long history with Spyder, but also other community members were like, no, this is the familiar one. We don't totally want to abandon that or its elements. We want to make sure that we have some continued, like ties with the community and the history. And also, so there's some recognition, right? People don't think this is a totally new thing. So that was really important, despite how new it may look, which is kind of, I think, why we ended up with a lot of iterations that kept the web, kept the red, even though we adjusted it some, because that red was kind of, so value meaning how light or dark a color is, it's kind of a mid value, which means when you put it on a light color, it doesn't stand out always too well. And when you put it on the dark color, not quite either. So we kind of took a stand with that and went a little bit darker, also so that it looked a little less like a warning red, if that makes sense, because there's a lot of common like errors or those kind of things using that really bright red. So we were trying to pull elements from it, but also make it a little bit more, what do I want to say here? Like one of the things that I found a lot was there's kind of a maintenance thing to this, that even though the last logo, I would say I've seen a lot of open source logos, and the Spyder one was not one that stood out to me where I was like, this isn't working for the project. It seemed like it was working in all the places it was being used and nobody was having a problem with it. In fact, I think it does some things really well. Like it's a very distinctive logo, meaning it stands out a lot. And is really recognizable. I also think it scales pretty well. But one of the problems I found when I was working with it myself, and I had kind of heard, was with those three colors, sometimes it was tricky to find a combination of the three colors, right, that would work on whatever background you were using, whether that was like, oh, well, I needed to have this color behind the web, but I need the web to have this color, and the text doesn't show up on this. And that led to people having to make a lot of different versions of it and always kind of like second guess what things would work. So that was something that we kept the colors, but we also reduced it a little to try and bring it back down to 2. And this can also become a 1 color logo a lot easier. So I don't think I can easily do that right now. But if you really need it to be simple, this will work and all is 1 color. Whereas the current one, if you make it all 1 color, you really just get the silhouette of it. And so those were some things that we were trying to do to make it simpler, but keep the ties to the original and also make it feel a little bit more reflective of like how it feels in the interface. That was another reason we went with kind of like the squares, and we talked about how like all the panes are a huge part of Spyder, right? That you can configure this thing with all these pieces. And so, yeah, there you go.
Thanks for sharing it. I think it's a great logo. I'm gonna invite everyone in the chat to comment if they like it or not. Like, what's the best thing that you like about the logo? And I'm gonna say Stephanie's also on the chat with us, and she's gonna be answering questions if in case you want to ask them, or I can take them live if that's also something you like. Hello, Stephanie in the chat. Thanks for helping us today. Okay, so the new logo, yay! How did you start doing this? How did the process start? Like, what is the first thing you do when someone tells you like, here, do a new logo, please?
Oh boy. Yeah, that's a really good question, actually. I know people often get excited to see that kind of thought process. The main things that happened with this was okay, disclaimer. I guess I didn't introduce myself that well either. I am formally, like, my title is UX UI designer. I've done a lot of different types of design. So this is by far not my first logo. It will probably not be my last. But at the same time, there are people who create whole like careers around logo work, and that is not me either, right? So I'm kind of in this in-between space where I am, though, the person who often ends up working with logos in use, whether that's in an interface or a website, because those are things vary within the scope of what I do day to day. And so for me with logos, I'm really function driven. Like, what does a logo need to do, right, to actually work and do its job, which is, you know, it's got a bunch of jobs it needs to do. So we're kind of worried about that. And so in that way, I kind of approach it the same way I do other problems, where I'm talking to the team and like, okay, you know, what do you like about the current one? What do you not like? Where, like, tell me about like a time you had to use the logo. And then, you know, when people tell you stories, you start to find like, oh, they're having problems when they do this or this, right? That people may not even think to tell you if you just ask them what the problems are. And so that was kind of an important thing. Another thing I wanted to say with that, though, is like, there was some previous discussion and some past issues that I went back and looked at. And that was also helpful to kind of see. Another thing I remember asking that I think threw the team kind of for a loop, and I would like to say you aren't the only ones who I was surprised with that, was I asked, like, what is Spyder's mission, right? Like, what is the goal? Why does this exist? You know what I mean? Like, I think functionally it's kind of easy to see like, oh, because we want to do this thing. But I find a lot of people don't think about that. And a logo, since it is trying to reflect a lot of things and concepts, it can be a good time to stop and think about that. So I remember having that discussion a little too, because from there, I can show you, there we go. Okay. From there, one of the main things I do, I think because I'm someone who really likes like words and concepts, is I write down things that people tell me, right? So some words that came up a lot with Spyder were like open and kind of this like, you know, workspace, almost like a toolbox even, right? There's a lot of different things going on, but they're all things that people need to work on. So I start with those kind of words, and these are just some photos of some of my sketches, because I know people like to see that, and that's something that doesn't get posted always. So all scrambled up here are a ton of tiny ideas of different drawings, and it became clear pretty quickly too that the web was one of the key things that the community wanted to keep. Like, those were the ones getting the most positive feedback, people talking about that, and also thinking like the web as not only with like the Spyder pun, but also webs being connections, right? And that makes a lot of sense for a community-driven project, and in the sense of having all these different panes that are connected and interact with each other. So from there with sketches, a lot of people argue about what a design process is, but I think most people would agree it kind of cycles. It's not linear. And so there's kind of this pattern of like concept, sketch, and I'm moving the zoom window out of the way to see, there we go. And then like we create some kind of version, right? So more behind the scenes things, I guess, seeing a lot of the iterations that happen here. And then it'd be like, okay, I'm going to post some of these. I'm going to try them out in things. Like one of the things I do a lot when I mock it up is I like to mock it up as a favicon in a website, because that's one of the smallest cases that people will see a logo regularly, right? So if I zoom out and I can't kind of tell what that is, or it doesn't look right next to other things, then you know that that one's probably not going to work that well, right? So that's a really common application I like to try things out in, unless I know a project has more. And so then people would say, oh, we think this, oh, we think this. We get feedback. I go back to sketches, right? And then we get the next versions, right? Oh, that's not really the one yeah. And then we start moving right this direction. You can also see here, like, the web really killed me in this logo, if I may be honest. Webs are really difficult. I think conceptually it's fun, but it was kind of a challenge for me for sure. I drew a lot of webs trying to figure out the limits of what makes like a web look most webby and what would work well scaling. But so here you can see a lot of ideas too when we were talking about additional colors, but keeping it in a way that it could be designed with one color. We also went through some different typefaces and seeing then those applied, once again, me testing them in different situations. Then we get feedback, we go back to sketches, we try some other things. So yeah, that's kind of the process here that I find, at least. Oh, and then this was the point when they were like, maybe we don't want them at web. Maybe we want to go more abstract, which we ended up, I think, obviously pulling back from again. But yeah, so I don't know, were those good to look at? Oh, and here's some more different use cases. But yeah, did that answer your question well enough?
Yeah, of course. I really like seeing these all the designs that you did. It's really impressive, like the amount of work that it has like behind the one last finalist that is the one that we see. So I think it's really impressive. Can you maybe talk about some of these ideas that you had before and then they were not used, and why? Maybe only two or three, the most memorable ones for you, that you say like, oh, maybe this one was the one that I liked the most, but they didn't like it because of this. I don't know.
Yeah, I can do that here. I'm sharing like a million different screens with you to let me scroll. Yeah, there is a lot of stuff happening because usually your first idea is not the one that ends up being strongest, right? And so I would say that this is kind of expected for me, but I think Spyder, of some open source logos I've worked on, I have the like largest number of files for it. Like I think we got up to version 10 in number of files, and as you saw, it's not like one file has one idea, right? So we certainly went through a lot of options with this one. Oh, there is the one I wanted to show you. Scroll, scroll, scroll. Okay, no, this isn't going to work. Oh, it collapsed it again. That's why. Okay, yeah, so here we go. What is it doing now? Okay, never mind. Maybe I'm showing you on Illustrator. Sorry about that. I thought I had a lighter way to show you. So, okay. One of my favorites actually was one that got knocked out right away. I do think that this one isn't that like refined, if that makes sense. Like it's still an early concept, but I actually really liked some of the abstract ones, even though I totally agree in the end, it loses a lot of the relationship to past logos, which was a critical thing we wanted to keep. And I would also say at this point, like without a lot of further polishing, kind of the idea of this shape is something that is not the most distinctive, I would say, that other people use. But I really liked this concept because it came out of some discussion, once again, kind of about the panes, but the openness. And so something I ended up doing a lot was kind of that like cliche, like hand framing thing when I was drawing, because I was like messing with the interface at one point and just doodling on top of it. And I was like, there's a lot of like these boxes, but boxes aren't like a right interesting shape. Like a rectangle isn't necessarily a distinctive logo shape on its own, right? So I was kind of like, okay, what if we're starting to pretend like we're framing this thing, but at the same time it's not a totally closed rectangle, right? Because it's an open source project, anyone can come work with it. anyone can do all these things, and there's kind of this openness in the community, but also this degree of like unity that's giving it shape. And so that was why I really liked this concept. But as I said, I think there's really good reasons we didn't go with it, including like that it doesn't have as much relationship to past ones, and the abstractness is not necessarily what everyone wants from it. But yeah, so that's like an example of one that I liked that didn't go very far. I don't know, do you have ones you remember that you'd want me to show?
I remember a lot when we started doing the face of the spider. Like I know you proposed ones that had the not the web but the face of the spider.
Oh,
that was something
gosh.
that we also explored. And I remember we didn't like that much. So maybe you can
Yeah.
show some of them. And
yeah, I can go. Oh, that one's horrible. Yeah.
it was not horrible. We just didn't like the face of the spider in the logo.
I thought it was horrible. Like, okay, I do look at my own work, and it's just something I find with open source, just like with what am I trying to say? Just like with any other open source contribution, I would say that design, it's always better, right, to bring things out early and iterate and not be self-conscious about things. And so I try and post frequently. But sometimes I look back and I'm like, oh boy, what was I thinking? And this is one I look back and say, oh, what was I thinking? But I don't know. So I think you're kind of talking about these because there was an initial, when we were talking about what elements to keep, there was kind of we want to keep the web, we want to keep the Python, right? We want to keep all these pieces. And so I was trying to figure out how to integrate the pieces in a way that they hadn't been. And so I was like, okay, what if instead of the web being the main element, we switch it up and we actually focus on like the Python and the web is kind of more of a backseat. But yeah, this is not one I look back fondly on, but I'm glad you remember it. I guess it's memorable with its little face. Yeah, so yeah, this is a long time ago.
That's cute. It's cute.
Thanks.
Okay, so after that many ones that you did, I remember we arrived at the 2 finalists that were like, these are the 2 that we like. It was originally one that we liked a lot, but then we started like giving up ideas so that you could maybe convert that one into another, and then we ended up with both of them. So maybe can you talk about those 2? Because I know that that's the ones that we showed to people, and that's the 2 that we use for voting and stuff.
Right. Yeah. So I think they both, so this is the one we ended up with essentially, but also that's gonna move. Okay. But the one next to it, they're really close. The 2, oh nope, there it is. Okay, it's just lagging. Yeah. So they're pretty close together. I would say they both have the same concept. They both are kind of that web with that reference to the pane in the rectangle, but also one of the things we got to here was earlier versions that were kind of using the web weren't as integrated with the word mark, which is the part of the logo that has the name. So in this case, Spyder, that's what that's called. And so they were kind of feeling separate. And one of the things that was really bothering me, as you probably maybe have kind of seen behind me, I left up the hung up Spyder logos, which is what I do between iterations. I stare at them a lot and take notes on them. And so one of the notes I found myself that I kept taking was this whole thing about like, okay, the logo mark, which is without the word, that's what you call the part that's just the image, kind of, if you will, feels really separate from the word mark. Like they feel like 2 different things. And even though that's kind of good in the sense that sometimes we have to break them up, they feel like they have no relationship. And so that feels like really weird, and also means that we don't have an interesting shape for the main logo because it really just feels like a rectangle. And so what happened with that was I was trying to see like, what's a way that we can put things together a little bit more and make them have more of a relationship. So that ended up being like, oh, you know, what if we kind of do kind of that monogram logo style, which refers to logos that are using like an initial of the brand, which was something we had talked about early on when I asked you all, like, you know, talk to me about some logos that you really like. There were several monogram ones shared. So it was kind of looping back to that idea and also trying to build a relationship. But the 2 that we ended up testing, which were named 316 and 317 on the issue, just for easy reference, are that same concept. The big difference was this version is, right, using this, we were kind of calling it like the outline, like it's using a thin stroke for the web instead of where this version is cutting out the web from a solid shape, which kind of changes the way that it interacts with what's behind it or around it. And so when we were testing that on mockups, we ended up with these two because they were good for some different situations, and we kind of couldn't agree. Yeah.
So you were talking about the issue. Can you show us the issue maybe? Because
Yeah.
maybe I just want to say that this process was made like in GitHub. Like it was a really transparent process, and it was really good to have input from a lot of people there. Like there were people commenting and saying like, hey, I like these, I don't like that. And I want to say that Isabella did a really good job on like replying to everyone's suggestions and comments. And these finalists that we arrived to were taking into account not only like the team's preferences, but also everyone that commented there on the issue. So I think it was great. There was even people like proposing designs, and we were taking elements from those designs as well. So it was a really great thing to do. And I really feel that we did take into account a lot what people wanted us to do. So at the end, after we had two finalists, can you maybe tell us about how did we end up taking the decision and maybe showing the issue that we used for voting? Because I know it's linked there somewhere.
I can get you I know what number it is too, if we need to. But yeah, so we did end up, I agree though, you're right. There was a lot of feedback, which was, it's always intimidating, but like it's a good intimidating, you know, it means people care. I just always get like, oh gosh, you know, there's so many people that are all bringing up really good points, and me as someone with a lot of projects in my head trying to keep up with them all, and I'm just like, I want to like do you all justice. So the pressure was definitely on, but it was really cool to see that. I want to say it's, if I do GitHub Spyder issues 50, it's that one. This is the voting issue though that you were bringing up. And so it was, we made a separate issue. This is kind of based on what had happened with the NumPy logo voting too, just to be clear, this was based on a different process. So you open the issue, we had the PDFs so that people could share them side by side and not just have to see them scrolled the way that you saw in the previous issue. And then I tried to vote with emojis that weren't like, you know, positive for one and negative for the other, but we had a few things with that. And then, but it was really, your key thing was that you reached out to a lot of people, Juanita. Like it was pulling in, trying to get a breadth of responses instead of just, you know, just we had a number of people on the issue, but not the whole community, right? And so it was really your work that brought in more people, including a lot of people I didn't know were involved in Spyder, which really surprised me. So that was cool.
So I'm just going to tell this funny story about how we were thinking about asking previous contributors to vote in the issue. And then we looked up at the list of contributors, and it was like 150 people. And then I realized that I could not like tag them all at once. And Carlos was like, oh, you can tag them one by one. And I was like, okay, yeah, I'm going to do that just because we really want their input. So I ended up tagging like all of them one by one in the issue. And I think it did work because we got a lot of voting there. And I also sent the link for voting on the Gitter public channel of Spyder, which is where most of our users come to us asking questions. And I think we also did that in the Google group, which is also something we use for helping users there. So we had input from users, from contributors. All the team voted. Like I made sure that every single person in the team, including all the volunteers, voted. So I think it was great. And the difference was enormous. Like the winner won for a lot.
Yeah.
So I think most of the people are happy with the results. And I think the voting process was really great. So I'm going to go ahead and ask you a personal question. Which one was your favorite? It doesn't have to be from the two finalists, but if you want to talk about the two finalists, then go ahead and tell us why. I really want to know your opinion now that we have a winner and we can't change our minds about that.
Yeah, and I don't know. I just want to thank you one more time. I know you were working really hard on getting people involved because we had engagement, but we really, especially you, with all the work you do with community, really wanted to make sure that we were including a lot of people who might not have just, run into this issue that is more than a year old. So that was really important to me on your part. My favorite, I think, is the same. I don't know. It's always hard for me to choose because it's just like I could see a lot of them working, if that makes sense, because I am still very focused on like what jobs it needs to do, if that makes sense. I think my favorite, because I am just silly and love concepts, I think it's actually still I'm looking for where it was again, the one that I showed here. That was this. I think I like the meaning behind it. Like I said, I don't think it's the most polished design visually yet, but I think this one was probably the one that I got most, like I was most happy with when I posted it and still am looking back. But I like what we ended up with too. I think it works well. Like the more as I'm putting in PRs for that, it looks like it's working places, which is the idea, but even though you expect it, I don't know, sometimes I still get this pleasant surprise when things work, even though that was the goal all along. So, yeah.
Well, I'm going to go ahead and say that my favorite one was the finalist that didn't make it.
Which is right here. I can show that for you.
Yes, please do, because I don't have it open right now.
Yeah, no worries. I just have, as you've seen, a million windows open because all of these were in different places for some reason. Yeah, this one.
So that was my favorite because I think it integrated very well the S of the Spyder, and I just thought that the web coming out from the corner was really elegant and it was simple, and I really like the detail of it being filled because whenever you look at from like far away, it's sort of, yeah, it has this sense of that there's a logo there. And I know that one of the things we discussed with this one it was harder to make it like good work for light and dark backgrounds. So this was a tricky part of it, but that was my favorite. And well, I liked the other one as well, but I'm sad it didn't win because I really liked it. But
Yeah.
I guess, I mean, that's fine because I know we did this voting with a lot of people. So I know there's a bunch of people that are happy about the new logo.
Yeah. This
So
one's definitely heavier. Like I know exactly what you mean. like it has that weight from a distance from having the fill.
So do you have the old one there? Because I
like a side by side of the two?
Yes, so we can compare them and like look at them and see the elements. And I also wanted to talk a little bit about the colors because I know we changed it. We used to have a red for the for the previous logo, and now we have a different one. So do you recall why we decided to change this red and use another one? And the gray the same one? No.
I think it's not quite the same gray. There were a few grays that I found being used, but I think it's close. Yeah, I know, it's almost like I prepared for this. But yeah, I do remember with the red because that was all my doing. So any dislike to the current red can be directed at me. I will say that publicly. The main thing that stood out to me, while logos are actually a type of image and color and like content that is not required to meet web content accessibility guidelines, which are a set of guidelines what do I want to say? Guidelines on how to create content so that all people can use it, particularly disabled people, right? And so in this case, there's guidelines about color contrast, and logos are exempt from those because they're considered like a special class of thing. And so people can kind of do whatever they want with them. But something that I always think is like, just because you can, don't you still want people to be able to see it well, right? And so this red, I think I mentioned earlier, it's kind of got a mid value, so it's not too light or too dark. And so it really doesn't have the best contrast on some things, despite the fact that I am a big, I love bright colors. And so I actually like the red on like a personal level. But I just felt like it wasn't doing service to it. So, and the other thing I mentioned earlier, that it kind of is reminiscent of error colors, which I think is something that you and Stephanie brought up a lot, actually, was you're like, we look at this and we like see that things are breaking. And so, but as Carlos mentioned, and I think was important to a lot of other people, keeping that continuity, keeping like a red instead of totally changing it when we were going to change so many things was important. And so we ended up going a little bit darker, richer red, both because it helps with contrast and it looks a little bit less like an error, but yeah.
Well, I hope that this change is really good for Spyder, because I think that after 12 years taking the time to have a new design and doing all these considerations before choosing a logo, I think it's really important. And we did that thanks to you. So thank you for this new logo. I'm really excited about it. And really good if you're in the live stream watching our new logo, because it will be available in like, I don't know, 2 months, 1 month, I'm not quite sure, but it's not available soon. It's not available yet, sorry. Okay, Carlos.
There are PRs.
There are PRs. They haven't been merged though. So I want to ask Carlos, which one was his favorite as well? Can you?
Sure. For me, it was the one that was picked up at the end by the community. I was actually the last one to vote. Yeah, I didn't want to, I mean, for my name to appear. For example, you can see there are people that has reacted to the logo. So I decided, even if the decision was already taken, I just decided to vote at the end. And yeah, I think it's a great logo. I don't know if you have mentioned, because I went offline for a little bit, but we also, I mean, reach this final design thanks to Quentin Peter. So, I mean, Isabella posted like the logos that you are seeing behind her, but were not exactly rounded around the edges, but it has they have squares. And Quentin suggested using rounded borders, and I think that was the final thing that convinced us that this was a great logo, and also extending the web to go up to the borders of the logo. So those two things were really nice, and I want to thank also Quentin, in case you haven't done it yet, for his ideas. Yeah, exactly that.
Ta-da! I knew who you were talking about, but yeah.
And well, for those who don't know him, Quentin is one of our core developers. He has been using Spyder, I think, for 4 years, but started to contribute to it the last 2 years, and has been a great addition to the community. But yeah, I think the current logo is a really pretty one. I really like it, and yeah, I'm really happy with Isabella's work.
Thanks.
You all are too kind.
Okay, so here is the bonus part of this Spydercast. So we're not only going to show you the new logo, but we're also going to show you the new splashes screen. Because we also decided to change that to match our new logo design. So I'm gonna ask Carlos first to talk about the previous splashes screen, and like maybe show it on the screen and talk about like who made it and how was it made and stuff. So can you share your screen?
Yeah. So let me do that. So this is not actually the current splash screen. It is the first splash screen, the one that Pierre added for Spyder 1.0. But you can see that it's pretty much the same, at least the background. And it also contains like a Spyder and the current logo and stuff like that. So it's very recognizable, and we haven't used it one variation or another of this splash screen in the last 12 years, because Spyder 1.0 was released in 2009, as I mentioned before. And the main idea behind this screen is this photo. So Pierre took this photo, I think 1 year before Spyder 1.0 was released, and he took it in his step-parents' garden. And you can see here that there is the spider web, kind of recognizable, and there's also a very small spider there. But since it didn't make much sense to leave it for splash screen, Pierre decided to remove it, and And then he adapted this photo and gave it some blurriness and crop it, and yeah, he did some small changes to make it work for the splash screen using paint.net. So, I mean, Pierre, of course, is not a designer, he's a programmer, and he used simple tools, but still was, I think he did a really nice job with the current splash screen.
That's an impressive picture. Like, I think it is impressive.
Yeah.
I would also say I'm just really impressed when you're talking about the attitude that these like elements and that these designs were like an unnecessary part, you know, of a 1.0 release. That's not an attitude I hear very often in open source spaces. So I'm just impressed by that at all too, and like the initiative to make that happen, particularly with what I'm assuming was a smaller community at the time.
Yeah, I think, well, at that point, perhaps the only community was Pierre itself.
That's what I thought.
And I also forgot to mention his wife. Before I forget it, he gave Pierre critical feedback not only about the splash screen but also about the previous logo, and I think that worked very well. And yeah, I think that's one of the things that I liked about the Spyder one when I started to use it. I use it 1.0, I think, for a year before becoming a contributor, and I like the way that it was designed. And as you can see also in the previous, uh, sorry, in the previous Spidey screenshots, the idea of integrating several paints and trying to mix them together, especially make them work together as a single unit, was already there. And that was, uh, yeah, Pierre's fantastic work. I think also another thing to congratulate him. I just took his ideas and tried to improve them throughout the years, but the core of what Spyder is today, it was there. It was really Pierre's main motivation and to do this project.
So you showed us the original one, right? But the current one, it has the spider in the center, right? I think.
Yeah, let me show you. I wasn't prepared for that one, but
I can show it if you want me to.
okay, go ahead.
Um, so the current one is the one that has a spider in the center. So right now it is rectangular. It has the same picture that Carlos was showing, but it is a little bit cropped to the corner, and it has the spider with the white background logo in the center. So now that we saw the old one, let's see the new one. So
Okay.
Isabella, can you show us again, of course?
Right. Yeah. No. And do you want to see the issue first or the whole?
Yeah, I think let's see the issue, I guess,
Okay.
and see some of the ideas that we had at first, and then at the end we can see the finalist and the winner.
So the kind of impetus was that, you know, as we mentioned, oh, and just for, because I'm assuming you aren't reading this, the reason that we have this square here was at this point with the logo, we knew the size that we were going for because we'd narrowed it down, but I didn't want to choose a logo and put it in here and either confuse people or make people think that was something we were going with. So I just used a placeholder rectangle for a lot of these options. But the kind of impetus was, you know, we're going to have to change the splash screen anyway with the logo. And do we feel like, you know, the green fits with the rest of the UI when we don't really use that shade of green, when we don't really reference things like that in most places. And so we kind of were like, okay, this may be an opportunity to think like, should there be something with this? So a lot of these we were trying to go with some simple things just to keep some colors, break it up, but also have it feel a little different and use some of that, what am I trying to say? Some of that red that we were working with in some more places, since this is not a red that really shows up in the interface that they're in the logo. And we tried playing with some different shapes. We've got some nice free stock photos from unsplash.com just to give credit where credit is due. And so we kind of ended up with this where you're seeing on here, like the loading appearance is a part that's not in the final image, but does appear in Spyder. And so, yeah, we went through a bunch of images at the end because these ended up being the ones a lot of the team was telling me that they liked. And I think this was actually what we ended up with this full image, even though we were trying different crops. So yeah. But and one of the key things I want to say when we started doing photos was like, because one of the original ideas that was brought in was like, showing Spyder's interface, right? Because we're trying to link the splash screen a little bit more with the interface. And also like that kind of though leads you with those very, very stock feeling photos of like random code and an editor and it's like hacker, that. And we really didn't want to kind of have that cliche. And something that I think is really important with any project, but I think in open source I really like to emphasize is, right, these are things that people like are using to make things happen and they are working with other people, right? That these are like focused on people and not just the software. And so once we started going into the stock photos, that was something I was looking for when choosing, was I wanted to have that human element to some degree. So yeah, and I think we ended up, like the team ended up giving good positive feedback about that.
So, unexpected question, which one was your favorite?
That was unexpected. I don't know. I think I did end up liking this one. Like, I think I ended up liking what we went with. Gradients are always something with me. I have mixed feelings, but I don't know. I really like I was talking about, that human element. I do think that something as simple as these can also be really nice with just kind of this slash and color. I think it's kind of simple and can be pleasing that way. But yeah, I think one of those two. I do like the human element though, even though sometimes I feel like the photos are always just like, there's photos everywhere and it's nice to take a breather, but that isn't something common in Spyder. So I think it works as like I don't know.
So where did you get those photos?
They're from Unsplash, is a library basically of photos that people volunteer with creative. Well, they have a separate license that's similar to a Creative Commons license, which are open licenses for, right, that are commonly used for like content creation. And so they can be used. I can find the attribution for that person. The PR that we have for this puts them in the about screen, but off the top of my head, I'm not sure anymore because I looked at too many photos. But yeah, that's a resource that's, at least what I've seen, pretty popular with graphic designers because we often need stock photos. Yeah.
That's really good. So you first find the photo and then how do you edit those things? I mean, they look really cool in terms of the editing.
Oh, well, thanks. It's a pretty simple, at least for me, image. It's not probably the hardest thing I don't think it is. So yeah, we do actually have, when I start with things, I like to keep whatever the current thing is in the upper left so that I can always refer back to it. So there's that Spyder 5 one again. You can see all my crazy options. Ignore some of the colors because some of them are placeholders. But like with logos, like with most things, I do start with sketching. I don't have my sketches photographed for these. And also collecting like what, I don't know if those were in here. No, they weren't. I also go look at what else is out there, right? I haven't actually had to work on a splash screen before. I've worked on kind of similar things at other jobs. But so I was looking at what do different splash screens do, right? Like who is using images, who is not, what kind of shapes are they doing, right? And so then based on what I've seen there, I start drawing and thinking about what, matters to Spyder, since one of our key goals was thinking about what was going to work with the interface, which is part of why with these simple ones, they're just solid colors, because that's a lot of what Spyder does. Some of these darker ones are using that same background color in the default dark interface. Yeah, but so mostly it's kind of the same process of me sketching and taking feedback. And then when I'm looking at things, like I think about like, what do I want to say? When you create these things, there's a lot of messages going in them, even if that's not your main focus, right? Like I was talking about the photo choice. And so that's something that I was like, okay, what are we saying if we're going to do a photo? And what are we saying if we're doing like, where's that example? There's the ones with like just the Spyder interface kind of blurred out in the background. I was like, okay, what are we saying here? And it's like, okay, it's just kind of about the software, right? And so then those are the kind of things I often critique for myself, like in notes I take. And yeah, so it's a similar process though of iterating and taking feedback and just kind of keep going, keep thinking about it, and getting feedback from others is critical because I don't think you create useful things inside your head alone.
Yeah, I think the team had a lot of input in this one as well. So Carlos, which one was your favorite?
Uh-oh.
No, I like the one that was ended up being chosen to in this case.
You're so amenable.
He's lucky that all the things that he liked won.
No, I think it was a really good choice, especially because of the human element, as Isabella was saying. I also like the rounded corners in the bottom, the clear Spyder logo in in white and with a red background. And I think the first iterations that Isabella was showing look more like a business card. So that's why I didn't want them too much. And I also think, we went in this direction with feedback from all the teams. So for example, Isabella suggested the human element, but I remember that Juanita suggested using a photo. And at first, I was not convinced about that. I thought, no, that's not going to work. But then, thanks to Isabella, it worked at the end.
Yeah.
Yeah, I remember that I wanted to have a screenshot of a spider in the splash screen, and they were like, why would we have a screenshot of a spider if then we're going to show a spider? Like, it's redundant. Yeah. But then I think having the screenshot of a spider inside the computer, I think it totally worked. So I think it was a really, really good idea.
Photoshop. Uh-oh.
So can we see for last time the winner of our new splash screen, which we will see in our next version of Spyder? Yay! So be prepared for the next time you open Spyder. You won't see the old splash screen that we had before. Now we have this new one, which we hope you enjoy a lot. Okay, so one last question for Isabella. So what's next? What's your next job in terms of designing stuff? Are you designing some new stuff, or are you gonna
for the logo specifically, or Spyder overall?
For Spyder, I think.
Okay, so there is a little bit of wrap-up work with some of the things we're currently working on for 5.1. Most of them, on my side at least, I'm not aware of everyone, but are there. The logo is one of them. Something I have coming up with that hasn't quite finished because we were trying it in other spaces first was creating like even just a tiny guide so that people can kind of be like, okay, here's all the colors in one place. Here's how this was made so that other people can work with it, and kind of documenting those things. And having a consolidated place for the logos to live that aren't just the logos used in the application itself, because those are kind of optimized for the application, and just having a place where people can come grab that when they need, that's very unified. So that's something on my list regarding the logos. Other than that, with 5.1, we have some color updates to try and fix some of the contrast that, if you recall, the color has been an adventure, and it's going to continue to be just because there's so many moving parts to catch. But we're trying to address some of the lower contrast areas that were very kindly pointed out to us by users, particularly in the light mode. And we have the about screen. Oh, there's some updates to the about screen coming. And yeah, but next on that front, I actually want to start documenting some of our larger design choices, because I think I mentioned that also in a previous Spydercast, but a lot of the work we're doing, well, it may not look extremely different from some of the things that are happening in Spyder already, right? Like the dialogues still looked a lot like previous dialogues for the most part, minus some new images and way things are lined up. But when we're working with so many people, it can be really helpful to say like, hey, here's what we're doing for dialogue so that you can match the others. And then that's both helpful for contributors trying to figure out so they don't have to like think about like, oh no, like I don't know what I need to do here, right? And for people reviewing to say, hey, we want this to kind of line up with the others. Could you make sure that like the buttons are aligned this way because we asked for it here? So creating kind of a system so that people know what they can do, or like what designs we are using and what choices we're consciously making, because that also makes us realize where there's gaps in our own logic. So that's something I want to work on. And some other, we'll see, some exciting larger scale stuff is kind of in some issues, but I don't want to make promises when I don't know what that prioritization is right now. So
I think that's great. I feel like you have done a really good job with the new logo, the new colors, the new splash screen, and I think documenting all these design ideas is a really good start point for people that want to do these like at some point. Because I know there's a lot of people interested in designing logos or in doing some design stuff, and having someone to write some guidelines is really useful for all of them. So thank you for taking the time of doing that, because I think it's really important, especially in open source.
right. I know, big documentation high five from a documentation queen.
Yep. So, Carlos, one last question for you. Are you happy with the result?
Yeah, I'm really happy. I think Isabella did a great job. At the beginning, I think, I mean, because this process, as we told you, started, yeah, exactly 1 year ago. You can see the date of the first issue that Juanita opened about this, and it was exactly on July, the first days of July of 2020. And yeah, at the beginning, I thought it was going to be slow and probably was not going to work. We tried to do some logo redesign before and didn't work. So I was hesitant about this, but at the end, I think it worked pretty well. And also, just so you know, Pierre is also happy about this. I mean, of course, he was a bit heartbroken when he saw that we wanted to replace his logo, but we talk about that these days, and he told me that he really liked the new logo, and he agrees that now it's a good change, a good time to change it. So yeah, I think it's going to be a really nice improvement. I hope that users would like to see it in their Mac docs and in the Windows taskbar.
Well, thank you all for, what do I want to say? Like, as you said, it definitely took time, and thank you all for sticking with me with that, both the people here and the many other people that are not speaking right now on many different like levels of community engagement. We really had a lot of people sticking out, and just me yelling into the void with new logos would not have worked. So I can't thank that enough either, because it can be a difficult process, especially when we were running multiple things at once. And so it was kind of juggling a few projects. So thank you.
Thanks, Isabella. I think we have a really cool new logo and really cool new splash screen. So thank you, Isabella and Carlos, for joining me today. And thanks to Stephanie for being in the chat. And thanks to everyone who was watching. I hope you enjoyed our new logo and splash screen, and be ready to see them soon. So I'll see you in the next Spydercast, which I hope is soon.